This is Jim, and
receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 548.IS6402, certificate number 10403, Greek fire. Mathis, get down!
Greek fire is neither Greek nor fire.
Whoa.
Discuss.
Busted.
All right, that's a good episode. Tune in next week.
Turns out. What a great TED Talk this is going to be.
Well, it's not. It was not invented by the Greeks.
Right.
It was invented by the Greek-speaking former eastern portion of the Roman Empire, the Byzantines.
Right. Now, this is...
That doesn't make them Greek.
We get into some interesting historical geography here. You do or do not consider Byzantium to be part of the Roman Empire, the age of Rome?
Well, I think my position on this is well known. John, anybody who knows me has seen my t-shirts.
Right.
That say Byzantium not equal sign Rome. They've seen me at the rallies holding up my signs. I don't know. I think of it as I don't think of it as Rome. And I know it's important to them that they were Rome.
Yeah, it is.
Because they felt like they were carrying the torch.
They sure do.
They
did.
Possibly.
They did. But that's also, Russian Orthodoxy believed that it was the final inheritor of the Roman Empire as a result of its, as Constantinople fell, it all translated up to Kiev, the last holdouts.
We have a sense that there must have been a real fortress mentality with Europe just collapsing at this time. And this idea that the West must be defended against, whoever, the Bulgars or the Saracens or the Huns or
the hordes,
whoever the hordes are. There's always hordes.
Well, and Islam, right? After 700.
Right.
But it's always hard for me to think of Constantinople as a continuation of Rome, particularly since, sure, they spoke Greek.
It's like when Google buys YouTube. No, it's more like, it's like when a sports team moves, actually.
Uh-huh.
And the...
Yeah, that's very apt. It's like the Oklahoma Thunder.
Exactly. Do the Indianapolis Colts, do they inherit all the history of Baltimore? Baltimore wants that history, Like Indianapolis doesn't care about Johnny Unitas.
I have a guitar that I bought on the street in Baltimore from a street guy for $25 that has a Baltimore Colts horseshoe carved into the top of it. And I still have it and I still play it. And so I feel like connected to that legacy as well.
Because you bought stolen goods.
Yeah, because who knows? It could have been his dad's. I gave him $25 for it.
He had 6 bikes as well. I bought them all. I don't know why he had 6 bikes, but...
He had this great collection of purses.
So yeah, I don't think of it as Rome, but that was a big part of their identity. We are carrying on we are the Eastern Roman Empire.
Yeah, Latin was their official language, and they were keeping all the traditions. They were holding it. They were like, let us hold this for a minute while you guys sort yourself out down there in Rome.
Do you think that was the idea? They thought it was a temporary situation?
Well, I mean,
We're the temporary HQ for Rome while you guys figure out your cubicle issues.
they certainly were also trying that over in Avignon,
Right.
with their other popes.
That seemed more like we want to replace usage. That's like disrupting.
Yeah.
We're gonna disrupt the Catholic Church.
We have a new way of licking envelopes.
Download the Avignon app and check out our anti-pope. He rules.
But so here you are. You're so we've already started off dissing Byzantium as not Greek,
And a lot of people have probably tuned out already.
and also not
Hardcore
Rome.
Byzantines.
But also you're saying it wasn't fire, Greek fire.
Right. So Greek fire was a liquid. It was an incendiary weapon that could not be doused by water, which made it perfect, as you can imagine, for naval warfare.
I have imagined.
I've imagined it like even before there was like a whole Game of Thrones episode about this. It was, as the legend goes, it was the invention of one Callinicos of Heliopolis, who, despite being named that in some texts, appears to not be from Heliopolis at all.
Well, that's the thing. Heliopians are super.
There's no way it's Heliopian.
They are
The Heliopolitans.
the Heliopolitans. Very nice.
I consider myself a very Heliopolitan soul. I come from the Sun City. Don't go back to Sun City. Heliopolis would be in Egypt. It was an Egyptian temple. Maybe he was trying to keep people off the scent. He was not from Egypt. In most of the stories, he's a Syrian Jew. He's a refugee from some kind of Arab invasion of his homeland.
Wow, ripped from the headlines.
The other way around, I guess. And so he seeks refuge in Constantinople, the former Byzantium, which, probably the biggest city in the world at the time.
Yeah,
Until
right.
I get angry letters from Aztec booster, or I guess not Aztecs.
Somebody's gonna.
There's some non-Western city that's bigger than Constantinople, and I'm going to say that right now.
Beijing.
Some place you haven't heard of is bigger than the European city and better probably, and invented cooler stuff.
Well, you could even argue that Constantinople was. I mean, let's just go the whole hog and say it's not European.
That's exactly right. I am now one of these super woke people who's like, all the pharaohs were black. Deal with it. Constantinople is the modern day Istanbul, which is at the Bosphorus between Europe and Asia. So perfectly situated to collect the wisdom of both continents, I guess.
The crossroads and also the trade crossroads. Anything that was coming out of the Black Sea had to go by.
That's the narrowest place to cross.
In both directions, right? The narrowest place for anyone on a boat, and also if you're going from Asia to Europe and don't want to go through Russia.
All roads lead to Rome East.
Rome East, right?
They should have just called it like Rome East.
Rome Ost. Because all roads do not lead to Rome. You could go easily from...
Rome's on a peninsula. Almost no roads lead to Rome.
0 roads lead to Rome. But all roads do lead through Constantinople.
We're going to change this in the future so that in the future, 1,000 years hence, the proverb will be no roads lead to Rome. Only side roads lead to Rome.
Ring roads. It's the,
that's right. There's
the
a beltway.
405.
Stay on the beltway. Avoid Rome. Traffic's really bad on the S curves going through Trastevere right now. Callinicos came to Constantinople and he brought with him, the story goes, a family secret. His family had a recipe for this unusual substance that could burn through water and in some versions was even ignited by water.
What a weird family recipe.
No, your family doesn't have stuff like this. Like, we're going to make Granny's beanie cheese dip and Grandpa's jellied gasoline.
Grandpa's like viscous napalm that he's working on in the garage.
Get out the crock pot. Grandpa's making napalm for the party. So historians find this part of the story unlikely. Like, maybe there were a whole bunch of Byzantine chemists who were actually whipping this up and perfecting it over a course of generations. But everyone likes the story of the lone genius, then as now. And in this story, that's one Callinicos. In some versions of the story, it remains a family secret. Callinicos becomes the patriarch of the Lampros family of Greek fire makers.
Oh, so they license it.
It's a family industry.
They license the technology. It's like Microsoft DOS.
But we know that, well, it's more like a military contractor, Right. He's McDonnell Douglas or whatever. Or Dow Corning providing napalm to the army. Everybody
wants this proprietary kind of military secret. That's how you make the big dollars.
But the Byzantine leaders regarded it as a gift from God. They regarded it as their right as a royal and Christian people.
That is so convenient.
That's good for them. Like one of the emperors told his son that the recipe for Greek fire had been, quote, shown and revealed by an angel to the great and holy first Christian emperor Constantine.
So, the angel went right to the king.
Yeah, so there's some retroactive revisionist history, I guess. There's a retcon for you.
That's kind of not uncommon, right? That the king takes unto himself all of the good ideas.
We even do it in America, like all these people with oil paintings of George Washington kneeling at Valley Forge, something he probably did not do. Like we really want to believe.
I don't think he stood up in that boat, right? Like
it doesn't seem stable.
I've been to the crossing there, where the crossing of the Delaware happened. It's not that far across.
Were you about to make war on Trenton, New Jersey?
The thing is,
were you attacking?
The Hessians have always been problematic for me.
You just hate Hessians.
And I was like, those Hessians.
And you think they might have still been working in a factory somewhere in Trenton?
Come on, you guys. Shh. I know it's cold. Let's get over there. Get around on their backside.
Kick some Hessian butt.
But yeah, I bet you he was, if he went across in one of those rowboats, I bet you he was sitting down. He was a tall guy. George Washington was 6'5".
I was on a little rowboat with my kids this weekend over at the Arboretum. You can rent those little boats from the University of Washington. So we're paddling around the lake and looking at herons and basking tortoises. And that really is the kind of thing where, like, if I shifted my weight to my right side, either my daughter or my wife would be like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
Because the rowboat would go whoosh.
Everybody's going over.
So yeah, like standing up in front astride.
Particularly with the guy behind you holding a flag. Like,
do we need the flag?
It's not likely.
I totally got lost. Rhett Constantine.
Yeah.
Yes. So they regarded it as a gift from God that they would have the power to smite their adversaries. Because think of the symbolic power of just being able to squirt fire at people like an angel would do. Like when previously all they're doing is like catapulting rocks.
Well,
arrows.
Fire was long used in warfare.
Like flaming arrows over ramparts.
Flaming arrows and with catapults and trebuchets, like, taking a fiery thing and hurling it at your enemy.
Or just lighting somebody's fort on fire if they made the mistake of making it out of wood.
Yeah, and some of the early uses of this type of thing, pitch and whatnot, it did require that your spies would go sneak over and like paint your enemy's stuff in the middle of the night, and then the next day hit it with flaming arrows, and all of a sudden all their stuff would, their ramparts or whatever would burst into flame, and they would go, how did this happen? And it would some kind of, secret little commandos had gone over and painted the stuff with pitch, but it wasn't Greek fire.
That would be my job. I'd be like the guy in the army who just paints things with like resin. Give me my resin and my brushes. I'm good to go. I'm like
what?
Ninja of brushwork.
Ken Jennings, first in, last out.
No, first out. The brush guy's not there when the light's on fire, right? Like that was my understanding.
First in, first out.
That's right. So this was very effective.
So who were their enemies? I hate to put this into a quiz form.
So many enemies, John.
Who are the Byzantines trying to light on fire?
I'm hesitant to even bring this up because I think this is when it turns into a 40-minute John Roderick special.
Yeah, but I'm not going to do it. We're talking about
what
Greek
you
fire.
have to understand about the Saracens. The thing about the Fourth Crusade is
I'm not going to do it. I want to keep us on track here. We're talking about a technology and not the entire history of warfare in the ancient world.
You're a big picture guy. That's to your credit.
That's true.
And the reason why most people don't do that is not because they're trying to keep the conversation on track. It's because they don't know anything about the Bulgar Navy. And it's just so much about the Bulgar Navy.
Too much.
You've got this whole bookshelf over here with just books about the Bulgar Navy for some reason.
There it is. We're looking right at it.
So they were fighting Arabs from the south. They were fighting Slavs, the Rus. You mentioned Kiev. There were Slavic powers at this time trying to move down and take over these strategic parts of the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea.
That's right.
Am I passing the quiz?
No,
so
you're
far?
doing good. Yeah. Even Vikings were at this point making dramatic incursions all the way into the Mediterranean and all the way over to Byzantium.
I guess if you have the ship technology, why not go someplace you haven't burned yet, right?
And what's interesting, the Vikings were not conquerors; they were raiders.
Yeah, they just pillage. They take stuff and leave.
But they made it all this way, and the Vikings came down from the north too and followed the Volga all the way.
Oh, they came down. They didn't come around through Gibraltar.
They did both.
Oh my gosh.
So the ship raiding Vikings were coming up the Mediterranean, and what we laughingly refer to as the land Vikings. No, even
the land Vikings.
No, even the ones coming down through Russia were coming up rivers and so forth.
This is, we may have put this in the omnibus before, but this was always what Prince Valiant was doing. He was like some Viking guy in 1940s comic strips, but he was always just going to Africa and Newfoundland.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd be like, come on, Prince Valiant, maybe stick to the fjords,
Well,
stick to what you know.
It's like Flashman or...
right, those British... People don't know about the Flashman books, right?
The Flashman books are great. The premise is that this Victorian era British officer just happened to be at every single sort of like imperial misadventure that happened between 1840 and 1915.
Which was less unlikely back then. A
Really,
lot fewer people.
It's conceivable, but the books get to talk about, they're like Tintin, basically.
He's like Forrest Gump. He just goes everywhere.
That's right.
Yeah, we definitely want the future to be reading books that a 1950s British child would have loved. That's our goal.
I'm afraid that is me.
And the Bulgars, actually, not a kind of wheat, but actually, the ancestors of our modern day Balkans.
Right.
And the Byzantines took all comers. They could squirt terrifying fire jelly at you, and there was really no counter defense. I mean, eventually their enemies would learn water could not put out Greek fire, but some things could. In many, sand could. You can always suffocate fire, right? Yeah. And in other accounts mention strong vinegar would work, or old urine.
Ooh.
It says it's specifically old urine. Like they tried peeing on it, it didn't work.
But old urine.
Maybe does that mean is that urine from an older Saracen?
No, I think they were probably collecting it in vats.
You don't have to keep an 80-year-old man on your boat at all times. Guy, you got to piss on the fires again.
But this was an era of naval warfare primarily.
That's how you would defend Constantinople.
Yeah, that you would attack it by sea. Much easier to transport troops and munitions.
Faster.
And across, you're taking the short route rather than...
Just like George Washington.
That's right. Right across the river, all standing up in boats. But this was also so for most of ancient
we go.
Sails were not really the primary way of propelling a fighting ship.
They were rowing.
They were rowing.
And why is that? To be less dependent on the wind?
Well, they didn't,
Sails were crap for a long time. Like you had to invent good sails.
Sails were crap, and also your boat was not especially maneuverable. So prior to Greek fire, the number one way that ships fought one another was by ramming.
Right, the naval ram. That was the doomsday weapon then. I'm going to bump my boat into you.
Yeah, these big bronze covered like pikes that were underwater, and with all your rowers pulling hard, you'd steer yourself into the flank of your enemy and penetrate the hull, and then you could get back. That was the key.
You don't want to get stuck to a sinking enemy.
Yeah, if you have a sail and you ram into the enemy, the boat sinks and they drag you down. So then you could put it in reverse, like everybody pull back and then watch your enemy sink. But Greek fire changed that dynamic because you didn't want to get...
It's a super weapon you could use from a distance.
Yeah, you didn't want to get close to those guys.
You're not close enough to be rammed. The Greek fire, the last record of Greek fire being used is in the year 1099 against Pisa. So even Italian city-states coming to maraud would face the wrath of, the wrath of God, apparently revealed directly by an angel.
So this was not an instance where they were assaulting Pisa itself, but the Pisans were coming to them?
Well, they were fighting over shipping routes in the Eastern Mediterranean. So, right. Somewhere near Greek islands.
The Ionian side or the Aegean side.
The Pisans and the Byzantines were scrapping over trade routes.
Because Pisa's on the far side of Italy, so they've already made a trip.
Nothing's more interesting than a fight over trade routes, as George Lucas learned in the Star Wars prequels.
I can already see the scroll.
Let's talk about this for 2 hours. So there was this embargo of Corfu.
But this was right in the time of, the last use of Greek fire sounds like it was right in the time of the First Crusades.
Yes, and there's really not much record of the Greek fire being used in the Crusades, where you'd think that would really be its chance to shine. Like, if we're going to burn up some brown people, hey, that's where to do it. But there's no record of that, and it's not clear why Greek fire was the secret of Greek fire was lost.
Well, let's talk about how Greek fire is propelled, because that's interesting. It's not just that it's hurled. Greek fire actually functioned as a kind of flamethrower.
It was essentially a flamethrower, and it didn't start out that way, I think. I think, there are records of kind of more primitive versions of it, soaking cloth balls in it and putting them in a catapult on fire, or even inventing grenades, little like terracotta vases that had Greek fire in them. Can you imagine the first grenades are made of clay?
How fun. It's a Molotov cocktail, basically.
Exactly, except one you had to throw on a potter's wheel. But eventually it got perfected, so it wasn't just a formula, it was a whole weapons system.
I love this. It's like the Gatling gun on an A-10.
And that was kind of the secret of it. We should talk about the formula for Greek fire, because that's kind of regarded as the secret that's been lost to the ages. What was in this mysterious stuff? But honestly, the secret recipe might have been how it was prepared and administered, I guess.
Right.
There was a whole system below decks. These two British historians have studied at length and concluded that the system probably works something like this. There was a big bellows pumping a hearth below decks, and above that there's a big tin barrel full of the oil, which is being heated, and that's being pressurized by an external pump. So it's essentially a pressure cooker, and that preheating and pressurizing it is what makes it work. Because then you've got a valved bronze tube up to a nozzle, and you've got a siphon you can use to squirt it at enemy ships at high pressure, like a super soaker. And in some cases, there are records of Byzantine boats having scary animals carved at the prow, like a lion or whatever, a wolf. And the thing would be set up so the nozzle would be right in the thing's mouth. So you'd see this wolf at you just spraying fire from its jaws, a dragon or a lion or whatever. So it's psychological warfare too. That's pretty metal.
Wow. I mean, I'm no Macedonian.
Don't be so hard on yourself.
Or Cappadocian, but that seems scary to me. I mean, in a world where you still do believe that things are gifts from angry gods and that you can harness. I mean, that the gods are taking.
Sure, if you think God is on your side and your enemy thinks Allah is on his side, that can be literally fire from heaven.
Yeah. Well, in particular, this still being the era where gods took a firsthand interest in war, where they're like kind of walking around the battlefield.
Right. Like
vying with one another.
Like the Clash of the Titans thing where they've got kind of a chessboard in Mount Olympus and they're looking at where the troops would go, like a big risk board. In many accounts of this, if you're like some kind of rah-rah the West type, which we are not, of course.
No.
We hesitate to, we would like to tell you that the Arabs invented algebra.
Look, I don't even use the term the West. I don't even say Occident. I just say one planet, one people. your catchphrase. I only study astronomy, and I only use the Arabic names for all the stars. Excellent.
But for people who are like, Byzantium, the last torch of Rome, or whatever, this is what kept that alight. In some cases, literally. Yeah. For centuries. And it seems like a good analogy here would be Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'm sure that's about what you were about to say.
Wow. I mean, I always use Kentucky Fried Chicken analogies, but I'm really grasping at where you're going with
What
this.
would you think of as the secret of the success of a Kentucky Fried Chicken?
Oh, it's their secret recipe. They don't even talk about that anymore, but they used to a lot.
Yeah, everyone, do they not put that in the ads? When we were kids, every ad would just lord over us the fact that they had 11 herbs and spices.
Yeah,
and
11.
we didn't know what it was, and Popeyes didn't know what it was.
I couldn't even name 11 herbs and spices.
It made me angry.
I'm not even sure I could now. Thyme.
In fact, there are not 11 herbs and spices.
Frankincense?
Sage, thyme.
Myrrh?
Did we say thyme?
I said thyme. Garlic.
Sage.
Whatever, like 3 spice powder.
It's a genius advertising thing. Coca-Cola uses it too, this idea that we have a secret chemical undiscovered by science that makes our chicken delicious. Yeah. And, when they take the batter to lab, it makes people interested enough that they want to know. They've got to know. And when they take the batter labs, they're pretty much like, yeah, it's salt and pepper. This is what chicken tastes like if you put salt and pepper in the batter.
Salt and pepper, flour, and some green bits.
But Harlan Sanders' real innovation was the way he fried the chicken. He would fry it in this high I think he would brine it first to keep it moist, and then fry it under really high pressure, which apparently makes the skin nice and crisp while keeping the chicken inside.
High
moist.
Pressure chicken cooking.
And that's exactly what the Byzantines were doing. We fixate on what are the ingredients of this magical floating jelly stuff? But really, they just had some amazing high-tech, high-pressure cooking system below decks.
And my understanding is when the Greek fire was unleashed from the mouths of these bronze lions, that it made a loud, scary noise.
Okay, in many accounts, there is thunder when the fire comes.
That must have
And
been a weird sound.
You've never heard it before.
Yeah, for people who had never stood next to a blast furnace, as we all have in modern times.
Sure, we are. We're standing next to one now.
The blast furnace of my charisma.
Like they never even heard anything loud, right? What was the loudest sound before, James Watt's steam engine?
Yeah, blacksmith's hammer, or
Just a crazy guy yelling.
crazy guy
Like
yelling.
the loudest thing they would have heard would have
Maybe
been
an actual lion's roar.
it would have been crazy Xanthos yelling in the plaza, or an animal, an elephant. But most people would not have heard these exotic animals.
I
right?
suppose post Rome, it would be the sound of a Colosseum, a large
bunch of
gathering of
people.
people all screaming.
If you live in one of Earth's 6 cities, sure, you've heard a crowd.
Right.
In village life, you wouldn't even have heard that. The ocean maybe is the loudest thing.
I mean, I've spent quite a bit of time in European villages and like far out ones, and in most cases, the loudest thing is still a transistor radio.
Oh, I would have thought some guy's annoying scooter putting through town.
For sure. They're
With like a stack of 8 things on the back.
yeah, they're Lada that somehow the muffler rusted off.
So the fact that there was a big explosive noise leads some people to think that saltpeter might have been an element in Greek fire. And in fact, this could have been the first use of gunpowder in the West. I hasten to add that the Chinese had invented that, I'm sure, centuries ago.
Right, they were already having elaborate 4th of July displays.
They had the fireworks displays from the Fellowship of the Ring while we were still in caves drawing pictures of fireworks on our caves.
Yeah, they were blowing smoke rings through smoke rings.
And we're literally drawing fireworks on a cave wall, and then there's going to be one that goes boop, 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 boop,
Pa, pa, pa.
like a kid whose parents can't afford Disneyland.
So this special mixture is some sort of it's not just napalm, but also now has saltpeter in it. It's a kind of half and half.
If you're in the field of trying to recreate Greek fire, which you and I both are, and that's what we spend our weekends doing.
Mm-hmm.
The central mystery now is there are essentially 2 schools. Did it have saltpeter or did it not? Because there's widespread agreement about the rest.
Can you imagine being an academic who is so far up this tree that this is something you're arguing with other academics
So far
about?
up his own tree.
I so can imagine being an academic like that. I wonder if
I would
I've done the
love that.
wrong thing in my life.
Imagine the lengthy emails you could write to your rivals.
Dear sir,
An open letter. Once again, you mistake the evidence of the potassium nitrate.
your failure to accept my saltpeter theory puts you in the cast of men who are being rejected by history.
So there were a bunch of 19th century French scholars who were pretty sure that there was saltpeter based on the evidence of the thundering noise. There are other accounts that Greek fire could not merely survive getting wet, but actually would ignite when water was poured on it, which again would make it pretty cool in naval warfare scenario.
And there are chemicals that do ignite in water.
It's conceivable. Quicklime,
unlikely.
when you add water to quicklime, it creates, what would that be, an endothermic reaction? Anyway, it gets hot very quickly. You know this.
Yes.
Like, you've got all the bodies you've buried. Like, before you
When you
saw off
pour
the feet-
lime on them, be careful not to get it wet.
Before you saw off the feet and toss them in the Strait of Juan de Fuca.
Yeah, then your mother-in-law is going to wonder what's going on in the backyard.
So that's not the only thing. I mean, that's the only thing you use quicklime for. But, because it's useful in a lot of other kinds of scenarios because it creates heat when wet. So conceivably, there could be something like quicklime or calcium phosphide, which I hear people at that time could have produced by soaking bones in urine.
Oh, again, urine is such a jack of all trades element.
Maybe
in
that's why we've
ancient
lost all these
years.
technologies. They were all urine dependent. And once we created like better ways to sluice away our urine, we lost out on all this great tech.
Well, we spend so much time fingering our little objects back in.
What are we
well, you know what I mean.
I
Like,
don't. This is not how I pee.
our Our little iPads and pods
Right,
and peds.
right.
We've got all these little gizmos that attract our attention. But back in the old days, all you had was a rock, a bone, and a bag of pee.
Yeah, you have a rock and a bone, and you're like, what third thing could I add?
What if I add these to pee?
There's nothing left, but I do kind of need to pee.
What if I cover this with pee?
It's an ingredient you have to produce 3 or 4 times a day. It's natural that you try it in some of these recipes.
It has a lot of qualities too. It has interesting variations in color and smell. It's
I'm interested to hear what other qualities that fascinate you about your.
It's a preservative, right? It's a seasoning. It's one of the 11 herbs and spices. It's
every morning the Colonel would get up and pee in the vat. That's why we couldn't think of 11. There's only 10.
That's right. There's 10, and
the 11th spice was inside us all along, specifically in our bladders. So there may have been something like that in there, something really caustic that would produce high temperatures in water. But again, that could have just been, these stories get bigger and bigger every time they're told. Most of our stuff about Greek fire is secondary sources, either by and probably by Byzantines, making them want to themselves sound scarier.
Well, and also I think that something like this that isn't extinguished by water, but would hit water and dissipate, or it would spread across the surface of water. Mm-hmm. It might appear to be igniting water when really it's just, it's
if
just
you miss the guy lighting it, or in the heat of battle. One of the other Greek names for Greek fire was pyrkoletikon, sticky fire. Oh, yeah. And that's the main thing about it. It was jellied like modern day napalm. And that's probably because it had naphtha, which is where napalm gets its name.
And naphtha is like a mineral spirit.
It's a petroleum distillate. It's not too different from kerosene, I think. Easily ignitable, and they would use some kind of evergreen resin maybe to thicken it, and that would give it this kind of sticky quality.
You can make napalm now by just putting laundry detergent in gasoline, and the laundry detergent has enough of these sort of chemical properties that it creates a kind of
Are we doing a
gel.
bit, or are you now some kind of Alex Jones podcast where we instruct rural people on how to build anti-government ordinance?
Sorry, forget that I ever said that. Do not add
that thing that John says didn't work.
To gasoline and create homemade napalm.
Just pee on a Tide Pod and go throw it at your local post office or DMV.
When I was a teenager, I was really interested in this kind of stuff. And
shocker.
And I know. And at the time in Anchorage, you could buy black powder at Fred Meyer at your local grocery store.
Black powder is essentially gunpowder? It's some simple...
Yeah, it's a formulation of it. And there are hundreds of formulations of it for smokeless powder rifles and for, building homemade cannons and stuff. And they were on the shelves and not even behind the counter.
There were enough people at Fred Meyer wanting to build a homemade cannon that there was a section. Did the aisle say homemade cannon gear?
It was all this was before the NRA era, this contemporary era when rifles and guns
the politicization
are super politicized.
Gun ownership or not.
Yeah, right. In the 70s and 80s, it was like if you're out trying to, it was considered, I think, more sporting that you hunt with a black powder rifle. If you were such a good hunter that it got boring.
You're an outdoorsman. You're a scout.
Right. Why not load your own, right? A lot of people in Alaska loaded their own bullets. So they had machines in their garage where they would take, all the componentry, including black powder, and make actual jacketed bullets for regular rifles.
Jeez.
And so there were all these different formulations and
artisanal bullets.
Yeah. Oh,
that's going to come back. That'll, millennial gun ownership will be saved by
artisanal bullet makers.
By craft bullets.
There are still, I still have friends in Alaska who make their own, who load their own shot. Because you can determine how many grains of black powder you put in it.
That's your handicap? I'm such a good hunter.
I'm giving this bullet absolutely no chance. But
that's better than the opposite thing to do, which is to start hunting a more dangerous game until eventually you're hunting man.
The most dangerous game.
in your private animal estate.
But when I was about 14 years old, because we were out making little bombs with this stuff that we bought at Fred Meyer. And, you could, a 13-year-old go up with a canister of black powder and they would just sell it to you. They had no beef about it because apparently there were enough of us doing it. But so we were making bombs and then we didn't feel like it was enough of a challenge. And so we started to try and make our own black powder. And it's really just 3 ingredients. It's sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal.
Do you like it when I compare everything you say to a Star Trek episode?
Go ahead.
There's a classic Star Trek where Captain Kirk is on some planet having to fight this lizard king. It's not Jim Morrison. It's literally a lizard king.
Mm-hmm.
And he finds...
How do you know it's not Jim Morrison?
He takes out the mask.
He literally was a lizard king.
This is the end. Captain Kirk finds, sulfur. He finds saltpeter. He finds charcoal. Yeah, saltpeter's the oxidizer. The other two are fuels. He combines them, puts them in a big bamboo pipe, and essentially makes a bazooka and shoots the lizard king in the face.
Oh, Kirk.
It's the most metal thing he ever did.
Again, with the pow.
It just shows you what that guy could accomplish when there were no women on the planet to seduce.
Well, as someone who has
when
taken...
it's just him and a lizard guy, he decides not to have sex with it. He
Are you
decides
sure
to shoot it in the face.
It wasn't a lizard lady. That was why. He would have sexed her up otherwise.
That would be the twist.
It is surprisingly difficult to get the measurements of those three ingredients right.
Because Kirk did it first time.
And that is unlikely, because I tried it for weeks and weeks and weeks and created mixtures that did burn and explode.
My garage.
but no, we were always out in the swamp doing these experiments. But to actually get it, and even when we had the formula, to actually get it right and mixed properly was no small feat. And only a couple of times did I make my own gunpowder that actually would have worked as a kind of explosive. So
I wonder if that's the deal with Greek fire, just because we know the 4 or 5 things it likely had, we don't know the proportions.
No, it's extremely complicated to make these chemical formulations and do it repeatedly and do it reliably.
The Bulgars and the Arabs actually, at different points in these naval skirmishes, they captured warships, flame ships. They had the fire ships, so they had the whole mechanism. They had samples of the goop, and they still never got it.
Couldn't do it, yeah.
So I'm not saying something about the inherent stupidity of Bulgars.
No. The Bulgars were just as smart as anyone else.
Like, we could have 100% future Bulgarian audience. Maybe they will be the only survivors. Them and the Hessians.
Well, Bulgarians are different from Bulgars. Although they take their name from
They think
Bulgars.
of themselves as the descendants, I assume.
They do. But, the funny thing about Byzantium is that because they spoke Greek, the Greeks, contemporary Greeks and Greek, writers of the 19th and 20th century have identified it as a Greek empire.
The glorious Greek people.
Yeah, this was a Greek empire. And a lot of sort of Western, English professors supported this idea, but they weren't Greeks at all. So there's
it's just like you and I speak English, but we are not
at all
from
English.
England.
No, definitely no.
No, we do not eat mushy boiled vegetables.
But it's interesting how people lay claim to histories, but that's perhaps another episode in the omnibus.
Everybody thinks it's over now. Well, the thing that interests me about Greek fire is how romantic it seems. The quest for this amazing, beautiful... Think what a tableau it must have been to see these ships breathing fire at each other. We think of it as such a romantic, adventurous time.
If you don't think about the other side of the tableau of your enemy burning alive.
Well, it's essentially napalm. It's as if I would have nostalgia for the Vietnam era use of napalm.
Oh, those were the days back when I could flay the skin off of my enemies and watch them scream as they're...
Because, napalm came out of World War II when they would put latex into gasoline. And we've talked about the rubber shortages before. Once Japan took over all the plantations, the Allies couldn't get rubber.
Right.
We were reusing tires. So we couldn't do that anymore. So these Harvard brain trust guys put their heads together to try to come up with an artificial solution. And they found a powder. They made a chemical that was a powder you could put in gasoline.
Better living through chemistry. It was called Tide laundry detergent.
They invented Tide laundry detergent. There's a sponsorship we lost. And that was napalm. It was, you could spray it at stuff for the flamethrower and it would stick, and it did
This is how
terrible
we
things.
firebombed Tokyo, right?
With the jellied gasoline, right?
Yeah.
Don't.
And Dresden.
Because they, Tokyo in particular had, houses made of paper with roofs made of wood, and it didn't take a whole lot of tech to get that to go up.
Right.
In Vietnam, it was great for clearing ground. Just as in the Greek fire era, it had tremendous, as a psychological weapon, it had a huge impact. Imagine your enemy is able to squirt fire at you and it sticks to you, and it's the most painful thing you can imagine. And so in the West, people were, saw these very vivid images. The famous little girl running down a road naked, having been napalmed, that probably kind of ended the war right there. Once you see that, game over. And napalm's now banned for use against civilians by 1980 UN convention, the same one that bans landmines, booby traps, later laser weapons. Lasers have been banned.
No,
by
have
the
they really?
UN. Sorry.
What about
Sorry, Moonraker.
What about the sonic weapons that create a brown sound that makes the enemy poop their pants?
Yeah, what about the bad guy in Black Panther? He's got sonic weaponry. Is the Geneva Accords just going to take a look a blind eye at that?
Well, the Geneva
South
Accords
African
were
jerk?
not able to see Wakanda, so they aren't able to make those determinations.
There are currently talks about expanding the same accords to autonomous robots, not just drones, but robots where you program them and they start marching and just have an algorithm that tells them how to make war, which clearly is how our civilization will end.
Well, I'll tell you what, my stock in Boston Dynamics just plummeted.
There's no this treaty is from the early 80s. The U.S. did not sign it until the first day, in fact, of the Obama administration.
Oh, really?
Which I assume means we've unsigned it at some point in the last couple of years. But they're still out. Napalm is still, there's little certification of compliance, and napalm is still allowed against military targets, and you can use it against civilians if you can demonstrate that it's, in classic Catch-22 fashion, needed to protect life.
Right.
That's when you can.
You're allowed to burn these civilians as long as one American soldier who's working in a warehouse doesn't have his feelings hurt.
Yeah, it's that guy.
That's contemporary warfare.
Some Hessian factory worker. Do you know what happened to Napalm Girl, by the way?
No.
I just read up on it. She was told she would die. Instead, she had 17 surgeries and skin transplants.
Oh, no.
Survived. Became kind of a symbol of imperialist oppression
within Vietnam.
In Southeast Asia, yes, within now communist Vietnam. Was sent to Cuba to be educated. Went on her honeymoon to Moscow, but in the manner of the early 90s or in the 80s and 90s, stopped off in Newfoundland and defected to Canada.
Ha! Lol.
Owned. Now who won the Vietnam War? Canada. So she actually lives in Canada to this day, and there's new laser surgeries that I guess have been able to reduce some of the scarring from that famous AP photo of the attack.
Wow.
But it's just interesting how we think of Greek fire as such a fascinating, romantic, lost idea to the ages, but really
sure.
it's awful, probably.
So after this era, after the First Crusade era, Byzantium survived for many centuries, but what happened to Greek fire? Why did it fall out of favor?
It could be linked to the decline of the Byzantine Empire, although, as you say, if it disappeared in 1099, there was more Byzantium to go. I guess it's not Byzantium. It's Constantinople by then.
Well, Istanbul, Constantinople.
I feel like a lot of people don't know about Byzantium because They Might Be Gents didn't put the original Greek name in the song.
Right.
It's not their song. It's an old novelty song they covered. So it's not their fault.
Why does Byzantium... Yeah, I can't even.
The lyrics would have got
in there.
Pretty Byzantine.
Yeah. That actually makes the 40th reference to They Might Be Giants that we've done in this show. I think our bias is starting to be revealed.
Pro nerd music.
Yeah.
It could have been that the Byzantines lost access to the parts of the empire that produced some of these ingredients.
And there were innovations in naval warfare and certainly more maneuverable sailing ships, but also strategies changed where the Muslim armies realized don't get close enough to the Greek ships to let them burn you.
They would soak animal hides or pieces of felt in vinegar or something that was fireproof, and they could use that to shield against. Yeah, it was no longer a doomsday weapon.
But then gunpowder allowed for cannons and guns, and that put you at a distance from flames, so you could fight one another by shooting. Which, oh boy, talk about the romantic era that began with being able to shoot each other, and
send giant metal spheres, right through the side of their ship, and then a couple heads. Good times.
Oh, and then you could load those cannonballs with urine.
Urine makes everything better. I guess really the moral of the story is probably any romantic view of old-timey warfare is probably completely misleading. If anything, war was probably even more brutal and unpleasant then as it is now, right?
Well, yeah, because without antibiotics, war was infinitely worse because most of the people that died
slow gut wounds.
they died like They died over the course of weeks.
That really should be the motto of our time. Fewer slow gut wounds. I'm going to put that on a bumper sticker.
And that concludes Greek Fire. Entry 548.IS6402. Certificate number 10403 in the omnibus. Listeners, in the future,
I wonder which of our technologies are lost to them, by the way. Just as we lost Greek Fire and Damascus Steel and whatever.
we have presumed, that's right, we still don't know how to make Damascus steel really in the same way that...
That should be a separate entry.
Let's do that differently, yeah. I think there are two ideas, right, with this. The whole omnibus concept is either that all technology was lost and they've only just now recovered the ability to play our platinum records.
The first thing they did was they found this record and they're like, we better reverse engineer a record player.
We had a stylus taped to it and they were like...
As you do.
And I think probably at that point in time, with their many tentacles, they were learning to play Dixieland jazz.
And we just taught them the third invention, which would be napalm. Good job.
Yeah, all right. Well, just find some Tide laundry detergent that hasn't clumped. But yeah, I think they are either reverse engineering this or they are a highly advanced civilization.
But what if they're highly advanced, but there's still some little thing they can't do, just like us in Greek Fire?
Oh,
like
right.
What if they see YouTube videos of Rubik's Cubes and they're like, it turns on every axis. How would you even, and they can't figure it out.
Yeah. Even though they had them and could break them apart and see the mechanism, they just couldn't do it.
They're incredibly dumb.
What ends up happening, I think, is that they just can't play the blues. Like UFOs could come down here and know everything, but can they play the blues?
The blues will be the one lost invention.
Yeah.
That's probably it.
You have to feel the blues.
And you have to believe in a devil to sell your soul to him.
Oh, hello. Right. They may be too advanced to play the blues.
There's no atheist blues. I woke up this morning.
Oh, no.
I got on the internet.
Oh, no. Wow.
I argued with an Episcopalian guy.
But one thing that we hope you have not lost is the ability to look at social media, because social media, it turns out, is the true god of our time.
It's the best.
And Ken and I always talk about how much we get out of social media, how much
we find it rewarding. It has no corrosive properties to our brains at all.
That's absolutely true.
Love it.
You can spend as much time perusing social media as you want, and it only benefits you and your family.
Kind of like cocaine. Not addictive at all, just gives you a little boost to get you through the day.
Precisement. Anyway, you can go to our social media feeds at John Roderick, at Ken Jennings, at Omnibus Project on all of the various media. Ken is routinely hilarious. I routinely have to bite my knuckles to not say things that are going to get me in trouble.
You have fun Instagram photos like the detritus of 21st century life.
I do. You can see a lot about what the worlds we live in through my Instagram.
John Roderick's America.
I just take pictures of my dog and food, and I put them on there with no captions.
You are one of these Depression era guys wandering around.
I don't do either of those things. I hate those Instagram feeds. No, I do. I go out with my medium format camera and take pictures of Dust Bowl farmers.
It's great that you have the last government grant to do that. You're very, very lucky. Most of the rest of those expired in 1937.
They call me John Ansel Adams Roderick. Also, you can email us, which we encourage you to do because we like reading personal messages from our present time and the future, at omnibusproject@howstuffworks.com. That will get directly to us when we remember to check our email. Also on Facebook, if you still go to that cesspool.
We just said we love social media.
Oh,
you need to commit to this bit, John.
Please,
yes, and
when I say cesspool, I mean it in the Byzantine fashion,
something that's full of urine because it's awesome.
Giant vat of old urine that is used to put out napalm.
And pictures of dogs and sandwiches.
It's called Omnibus Futurelings on Facebook.
Listeners, from our vantage point, we speak to you from the distant past, and we have no idea how long our civilization will survive before all technology is lost, just as Greek fire was. We hope and pray that catastrophe may never come, even if it's the good kind, even if it's some Elon Musk singularity. I don't want those guys to be right.
I'm increasingly less enamored with the future that Elon Musk has envisioned for us. Ever since he started dating that pop star, I'm worried that he doesn't want to live like
Grimes is the queen of future Earth, John. Watch what you say.
I'm sorry, Grimes. But, I always thought of him as a Drax character from Moonraker who's wearing a Nehru jacket and living on a space station.
Sure.
But it just seems like he's somebody at Coachella now. Just backstage at Coachella, like wandering around. It's not as inspiring.
Maybe it wasn't Grimes. Maybe it was the UN banning laser weapons. And he was like, well, crap, there goes my whole plan.
Rawr.
I'm just going to go to Burning Man. But if the worst comes soon, whether that's a Elon Musk nerd singularity future or a giant fireball from the heavens, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word to you. But we hope that the fiery hand of God will allow us to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.